Back to the kidding side, clearly, we've been through some difficult issues, some complicated issues. Clearly, it's time for the stand-up economist again. Yoram?
First of all, how about another round of applause for Malia and the folks you just saw? They were killing. All right. I did some political jokes last time. I'll do some economics jokes this time. Whoops. This is Mankiw's 10 Principles of Economics. Translated. So for those of you who don't know, Greg Mankiw, Harvard professor, currently advising Mitt Romney, wrote one of the best-selling economics textbooks in the country. It's based on these 10 principles here. I know there's a lot of words, but just take my word, you pretty much need a PhD in economics to understand all of these principles. Fortunately, I have a PhD in economics, so I've taken it upon myself to translate these principles for the more fortunate among you. We're going to begin by separating them into the first 7 principles, which are microeconomics, and the last 3, which are macroeconomics. The difference, of course, being that microeconomists are wrong about little things, and macroeconomists are wrong about big things. We're going to begin with the macro principles 8, 9, and 10. Believe it or not, these all have the exact same translation, namely blah, blah, blah. This needs no proof, really, but as further proof, we can actually go up 1 font size. So let's go back to the micro principles. Now, the first one, people face trade-offs. The translation here is very simple. Choices are bad. This is a simple syllogism. Trade-offs are bad. Anytime you have choices, you have trade-offs. Therefore, choices have to be bad. If you don't understand that, take a look at the second principle. The cost of something is what you give up to get it. Translation, choices are really bad. Now, I have a simple little demonstration of this fact. Let's say that someone offers you a Snickers bar that you value at $1. Okay, then what you can loosely think of as your economic profit in this situation is the $1 of the Snickers bar minus the cost of what you give up to get it, which is nothing. Your economic profit is $1. Now, to begin to understand why choices are bad, imagine that someone offers you a choice between the Snickers bar that you value at $1 and some M&Ms that you value at 70 cents. Now your economic profit is only 30 cents. You begin to understand why choices are bad. The worst possible situation, in fact, is being offered a choice between a Snickers bar and an identical Snickers bar, because then your economic profit is 0. Now, people who are not trained in economics might say that that's no different than just being offered 1 Snickers bar, but that kind of sloppy thinking will never get you a tenure-track position. Simplifying. Choices are bad. Choices are really bad. I'm not going to beat around the bush with you people. If you don't understand why choices are bad, you're probably stupid. Moving on. Principle number 3, rational people think at the margin. Translation, people are stupid. Now, it is immediately obvious that people do not think at the margin. Nobody goes to the grocery store and says, I'm going to buy an orange. I'm going to buy another orange. I'm going to buy another orange. That joke only makes sense to econ majors. People don't think like that. Right? But if people don't think at the margin, and if, as Mankiw says, rational people do think at the margin, we are led to a most unhappy conclusion. People are not rational. People, in other words, are stupid. But before you despair for humanity, take a look at the next principle. People respond to incentives. Now, the dictionary says that incentive is a noun. That's a synonym for motive. So when Mankiw says that people respond to incentives, what he's saying is that people are motivated by motives. You might think this is a bit like saying that tautologies are tautological, right? I mean, people would have to be pretty stupid to be unmotivated by motives. But remember principle 3. People are stupid. Right? Hence the need for principle 4 to tell us that people aren't that stupid. All right? Simplifying again, move on to every economist's favorite topic, free trade. Principle 5, trade can make everyone better off. Translation, trade can make everyone worse off. Now, you may wonder how the translation of principle 5 is the opposite of the principle itself. I have a simple proof of this fact that will blow your mind. I want you to compare 2 statements. One of them is trade can make everyone better off, and the other one is trade will make everyone better off. Now, if you had to pick one of those 2 statements to put in your best-selling economics textbook, right, it's no contest. The second statement is clearly better. But Mankiw uses the first statement instead. And if you think about why, there's only one possible explanation. The second statement has got to be wrong. In other words, trade can make some people worse off, and from there it's just a hop, skip, and a jump to trade can make everyone worse off. Now, I figured some of you would have some questions about this, so I added a footnote with some details. Eat your heart out. Now that we've cleared that up, I want you to see the last two principles. Markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. Translation, governments are stupid. And governments can sometimes improve market outcomes. Translation, governments aren't that stupid. Right? Follow immediately from principle 5 in its translation. Okay, if trade can make everyone better off, what the heck do we need government for? Just let people trade. So governments are stupid. But if trade can make everyone worse off, we better have a government around to stop people from trading. So there are the 10 principles of economics translated. So I filmed this a couple of years ago and put it up on my website, standupeconomist.com, and on YouTube, not thinking very much of it. And I'm embarrassed to say that it's heading towards 1 million hits on YouTube, which is a lot for economics jokes. Not a lot for videos about, like, puppies. But it's a lot for economics jokes, and many of those hits are because the video was posted on Greg Mankiw's blog. It turns out that he's a fan of my video. Either that or else he comes from the school of there's no such thing as bad publicity. And in fact, I got to perform in his class at Harvard. It was the last leg of my 2008 supply side world tour, which was mostly a trip to Israel with my father. But as long as I was there, I did some comedy, and then I stopped off at Cambridge on my way home. And Greg originally wasn't going to tell his students I was coming. He just said there was a surprise guest who was coming to class. But then he had to tell them that I was coming because some students came to his office hours and said there was a rumor going around the Harvard campus that Ben Bernanke was coming to class. I'd like to think they got the better end of the deal. In any case, one of the great things about YouTube is that not only do a lot of people waste a lot of time looking at videos on YouTube, a significant fraction of those people waste even more time commenting on videos on YouTube, to the point now where the comments on my YouTube video are actually funnier than the video itself. So I want to share with you some of my favorites, starting with someone with the screen name of Coolway. And Coolway writes, I can't tell whether this video is supposed to be funny or educational. I can't either. Runner-up, you're funny, and I don't say that to a lot of people. Lots of people are not funny. Lots of people are sad. I like to think I'm doing something new in the world by doing economics comedy. Apparently not. The next person writes, a Jew who's an economist and a stand-up comedian. You can't get any more stereotypical than that. Every time I see this, I'm reminded of what my father actually said when I told him I was going to do stand-up comedy. So what you need to know about my father, he's a first-generation American. He's never owned a television. He's sort of divorced from popular culture. I told him I was going to do stand-up comedy. He said, Yoram, he said, be reasonable. Give me the name of a single Jew who's ever made it in stand-up comedy. Can't answer that. The man in the video is the most stupid man in the world. Impressive given the competition. Not everybody's a fan of the video. The next person writes, I spaced off listening to this just like in my real economics class. And then there are kind of the crazy people like this guy. They make economics boring and confusing on purpose because they don't want you to figure out that the whole economy is a Ponzi scheme. This guy gets bonus points for creating a new word, unpurpose. Not the craziest thing somebody wrote, though. The craziest thing somebody wrote was this. What a confusion of deceptions. The U.S. Congress does not print money as the Constitution dictates. That power was usurped by a cabal of international banksters in 1913. I finally figured out that this person was talking about the Federal Reserve System, but only because the next thing that he writes is that the Federal Reserve is about as federal as Federal Express. I honestly have no idea what this means, but I'm pretty sure this guy's voting for Ron Paul. So after this guy writes this nasty stuff about the Federal Reserve System on my YouTube comments page, somebody else feels compelled to come to the defense of the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States on my YouTube comments page. So here's what the next person writes. In defense of the Fed, if we got rid of it, we'd still need to replace it with something that does its functions, i.e. printing money and clearing checks. The first of which the Fed doesn't do, the second of which is a very minor role that the Fed has. So somebody else has to write in and correct this person and say, actually, the Fed doesn't print money. And this is like an A-plus answer. The Fed controls the money supply by expanding and contracting bank reserves. And then the first person writes back in and says, oh, yeah, that's right. Thanks. So now we're getting like edumacation on the YouTube comments page. Incidentally, for the high school teachers that were speaking earlier, I do come and do high school visits, so let me know. Not all exchanges are this nice, however. Mina's comment on YouTube starts with somebody who writes, this video rules. By the way, I'm not an economist. I switched my major, which compels somebody else to write in and say, thanks for keeping us updated. Let us know when you drop out altogether and devote your life to smoking crack. Kids these days. What I usually do is go back to this slide here, and the example in the footnote is actually a real example of trade making everyone worse off. It actually relates to the academic work that I do when I do climate change economics, but you're lucky because I don't have time to go through all the serious, boring stuff with you, so I'm going to have to skip it all. I will say, however, so here's this example, et cetera, et cetera. I will say that I did this serious stuff once for a very conservative crowd in Minnesota, and this guy came up to me at the end of my show and said that he thought that the stuff I said about climate change was the funniest part of my whole routine. Anyway, carbon concentrations are going up, temperatures are going up. I'll skip to the economics part. And the economics part is that the way economists think about climate change is that the way to get less pollution is to make polluting expensive. When you make polluting expensive, that gets market forces working to promote conservation, development of alternatives, right? All that stuff that economists love about capitalism, and I happen to think that capitalism is one of the most powerful forces on the planet. That's why I wear this T-shirt. It's my Enjoy Capitalism T-shirt. Right, so what I work on as an economist is using the tools of capitalism and the power market forces to promote the environment. A couple ways to do that, a carbon tax, an auction cap and trade system. Right, but the point of both those policies is to drive up the price of fossil fuels. That's a little bit of a hard sell. Suddenly you've stopped laughing. But there is a side benefit, right, besides saving the planet, which is that if you do these policies right, you generate a pile of revenue, and you can do all sorts of good stuff with that revenue. You all probably have your own ideas about what the state could do with a pile of revenue, but the idea that I promote is that we could be using, my clicker just started changing, I don't know why, most or all of that revenue to reduce or eliminate existing taxes. So what's called revenue neutral tax reform or tax shifting. Right, and the economic idea is that we should be taxing things we want less of instead of taxing things we want more of, right? We should, instead of taxing payroll and income and savings and investment, we should be taxing things we want less of, like carbon emissions. And this is an idea actually that has appeal across the political spectrum, certainly among economists, from Greg Mankiw to Paul Krugman. Al Gore likes the idea. George Will likes the idea. He came to one of my classes, actually, George Will, the Washington Post columnist, and I asked him what he doesn't believe in climate change. Caused by human activity anyway, and I asked him if he would support replacing the payroll tax with a carbon tax, and he said that he was all for it because he hates the payroll tax. He actually said he would be in favor of replacing the payroll tax with a yogurt tax. But I said replacing it with a carbon tax, and I asked him, I said, Al Gore agrees with that idea also. How do you feel about the fact that you agree with Al Gore on this issue? And he said, well, an idea should not be held responsible for the people who believe in it. And there's even a place that's done this. I live in Washington State, and just to my north up in Washington State, British Columbia has done this. They have a revenue-neutral carbon tax. Next year, it'll be $30 per ton of CO2, so 30 cents a gallon of gasoline, 3 cents a kilowatt-hour of coal-fired power. It's not nothing. It's the best climate policy in the world. 100% revenue-neutral. Use the money to reduce personal and corporate income taxes. BC now has the lowest corporate income tax rate in the G20. If that sounds attractive to you, then terrific, because I'm part of a group that's working on bringing this to the U.S. part of the Pacific Northwest, and we've just started this effort. So, we have a small advisory group that includes some folks from SurveyMonkey and a law professor up at UBC. If you're interested, I just encourage you to drop me a line and get involved. The message really is that, you know, and I want to especially encourage folks who are from the conservative or the business part of the political spectrum, sort of the you know, non-traditional allies. Drop me a line if you care about climate change and you want to do something more meaningful than voting for John Huntsman. It's not my fault. Then drop me a line. The bottom line message is, look, that dealing with climate change can be done in a market-friendly way, in a business-friendly way. We don't all have to move to communes and start wearing compostable underwear. Shieling Su actually mentioned that he said I should plug his book, and I said, okay, I'll plug your book, The Case for a Carbon Tax, as long as I can also plug my own book, The Cartoon Introduction to Economics, which also talks about carbon pricing. And actually, the macro version of this book is just out this week. You can buy it at Amazon next week, or I actually have a couple of copies. So if you desperately need a Christmas present for an economist, then come see me. In a couple of minutes, I'm happy to say that some economists have said nice things about the book. Greg Mankiw called it a painless way to learn economics, which I thought was especially generous coming from Greg Mankiw, given what I said about his book. I mean, I really think the only thing that I could have done that would have been meaner to Greg Mankiw would have been to post something on my blog calling his book a painful way to learn economics. Which I didn't do, but still, there's my contact information. Thank you all. I'm going to bring Pat back up to this stage. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Well, how good is that? On the expected strength of Yoram's presentation, I took the liberty of having our company economist rewrite my closing remarks. The bad news is they now say blah, 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 blah.